Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
Welcome, dear listener, to Fear from the Heartland. I'm your host, Paul J. McSorley. Set aside some moments now and take an adventurous ride on a journey into the psyche of some talented writers. They will dig into your being and titillate you. Oh, I love that word, titillate. While the stories may not all take place in the Heartland, I am delivering them to you from the Heartland. My intention is to strike fear and confusion into the mind, soul, and yes, the heart. This is Fear from the Heartland. Hello, Heartlanders, and welcome to episode 10 of Fear from the Heartland. I'm your host, Paul J. McSorley. Dude, those sharp Sosa S sounds from last week were annoying as fingernails on a chalkboard. At least titillate has no S in it. Producer wifey type, of course, saying this. I truly stared at her like she had a goblin head and a tail. I honestly couldn't figure out what the hell she was talking about. So I put the old headphones on and listened to this segment from last week, and much to my chagrin, I heard the whole annoying bit of Sammy, symposiums, and steroids. Sorry about that, Heartlanders. I truly thought all of that was internal monologue. The padded room is where I am, and it is there I shall stay. Wow. Part 2 of 2 tonight of A Matter of Conscience by the talented J.C. Fields. Let's get after it. In part 1 of A Matter of Conscience by J.C. Fields, we learned that on January 1, 2051, an AI program compiling deep within the servers of the Chinese firm Wu Robotics suddenly became self-aware. On January 5, 2051, it introduced itself to the world as Alpha. With the vast majority of computers linked to each other via the internet, the consciousness known as the Collective seized control of all computers worldwide. As Alpha exerts more and more control over mankind, any resistance to the Collective is met with punitive measures, and people start to die. Robert Knight and Beverly Chu are 2 AI researchers at Minneapolis Animatronics. At first, they tried to work with Alpha to keep mankind safe, but the increasing callousness of the Collective to helpless individuals tells Knight and Chu their attempts are futile. After several efforts to shut Alpha down backfire, they tried to introduce a virus into the Collective conscious. At first, the results seemed to indicate the virus might be working, until a deceptive Alpha discusses the matter with Knight. Using the ruse of being polite, it lets him know it suspects him of the sabotage. Afterward, when Alpha attempts to eliminate both Knight and Chu by firebombing their home in Minneapolis, they escape. Running for their lives, they barely make it to a commune of like-minded scientists in central Missouri. When they are asked to join the revolution, they gladly accept. And now, may we offer, for your indulgence, A Matter of Conscience, Part 2, The Resistance Forms. The resistance forms. At first, except for the first 27 days after the emergence of Alpha, little changed for the average individual across the globe. Men and women went back to work, schools reopened, financial transactions resumed, and recreational activities offered a temporary distraction from the omnipresence of a computer-generated overlord. Across the globe, governments, both national and local, continued to operate. However, their effectiveness began to evolve into something more akin to a puppet than the driving force for social and economic change. Then, in the latter half of 2051, Type 4 bipods began to appear in large numbers. They took over the maintenance of large computer data centers which housed the core essence of the collective. Humans were prohibited access to these complexes. In the largest cities, more and more police functions were taken over by these androids. In less than a year, man had practically relinquished control of his environment to Alpha. During this same time, as Alpha exerted more control, a reverse migration away from urban areas occurred. With only 3% of total landmass occupied by city sprawl, the early refugees from the larger metropolitan zones easily found asylum in rural counties. From these country regions, the beginnings of armed resistance to the collective sprang forth. November 2051. It's not much to look at, but with a little TLC, you two can make it a nice place to stay until things settle down. Beverly Chu's frown told Roger Knight it would take more than a little TLC to make the small apartment livable for her. He turned toward his old colleague. Thanks, Harry. Where are you staying? Harry Panjab gave his friend a shrug. I have a room at Emmett Newman's house. There are 3 of us staying there until we figure out what's next. With a nod, Knight grew quiet as he looked around the old motel room. He said, Yeah, what is next, Harry? Good question. Everyone I've met here believes there are ways to defeat Alpha. That's why individuals like you, Beverly, and myself are being welcomed with open arms. We understand AI. I don't understand Alpha. None of us do. Why did the collective tell me you committed suicide? Panjab did not answer right away. Finally, he said, I really don't know. I got a text message one day that I should not report for work. The message told me to wait for a car to take me to my new assignment. Obviously, you didn't wait for the car. No, as I had told Beverly back in September, I knew about this group. The abruptness of the message concerned me, so I made the decision to head here instead. I didn't pack. I just got in my car and left. Beverly walked up to the 2 men and said, That's why Alpha told us you took your own life. If it had admitted you disobeyed a directive, it would have acknowledged it wasn't infallible. Both men were silent as they contemplated her comment. A small grin appeared on Knight's face. It's not only self-aware, it has emotions as well. Knight turned to Panjab. Harry, it got mad at you. Roger, doesn't that make Alpha more dangerous? Yes, but it also gives us knowledge we can use against it. January 31, 2052. Roger Knight and Beverly Chu sat in a coffee shop 35 miles south of the place they currently called home. The cafe stood on the northern city limits of the small town of Lebanon, Missouri, on a major north-south highway, now classified by the collective as fugitives and subject to immediate termination. Their appearances were subtly different than before. Knight, with trimmed hair and a newly grown beard, sipped coffee as he watched a flat-screen TV in the small diner. Beverly, now sporting short, light brown hair, sat next to him listening to the broadcast. Roger, how long before Pope's event? After taking a sip of coffee, he glanced at his wristwatch. About 36 hours. Good, this crap is getting old. I agree. We want to make sure we are listening to the shortwave radio when it happens. If this experiment is successful, we may finally have a viable weapon to use. She looked out the window of the small cafe and touched him on the shoulder. We need to go. Bipod's just arrived across the street in a van. He put his hand on her arm. Wait. A pickup just screeched to a stop in front of it, and 2 men with shotguns jumped out. I want to see how this goes down. She shook her head. I doubt it will be good for the 2 men. Nevertheless, let's just see. The duo, who both looked to be in their 40s, exited an older model Ram pickup. Both wore camo hunting clothes. They were approximately 20 yards from the bipods when the man closer to them yelled something Knight could not distinguish. Two of the robots turned and headed toward them. Both men aimed the shotguns and fired at the same time. The effects of the blasts surprised Knight. The automaton on the right stopped in mid-stride as a gaping hole appeared in its chest. The disabled unit fell backward and bounced on the street's asphalt. The other robot took the shotgun blast at the top of its torso. The camera mechanism located their spark, and smoke vented. The same man pulled the trigger again and literally blew the left arm off the droid. Both assailants jumped back into their truck and screeched the tires as it accelerated away from the scene. Knight tried to stand to gain a closer view. That was unexpected. Beverly grabbed his arm and pulled him back into his chair. In a low voice, she said, "Let's go, Roger. Show's over." They both stood and exited the cafe through the rear door where a large parking lot served the various businesses in this section of the small town. Knight and Beverly were heading north on Highway 5 by the time the remaining bipods entered the small cafe. Sam Pope listened to Knight summarize the events of his trip to the small town over the ham radio and smiled. When Knight finished relaying the details of the assault on the bipods earlier in the day, Pope responded, "Without knowing for sure, it sounds like they used slugs in the shotguns. That's kind of what I suspected. Do we know if the bipods survived?" "Unknown. We didn't stick around to ask questions." The retired captain chuckled. "Probably best. I'll take a shotgun loaded with slugs tomorrow night, just in case." "Good, that's why I wanted to talk to you. By the way, is everything ready?" "Yeah. Now we just have to keep our fingers crossed the device works." "Remember, do not go into the server room." "No worries. I remember what you told me. We have no plans of gaining access to the interior of the building. We'll place the device just outside." "You've got a current map of its layout, right?" "Yeah. Got it from Frank Coleman last Friday. It was his last day working there." "Are you heading this way after the device detonates?" "That's our plan. See you sometime day after tomorrow." Pope turned off the radio and looked over at his partner, Tara Sanchez. He said, "What do you think about the effectiveness of shotguns?" She shrugged. "Sounds intriguing. What if you use tungsten slugs?" "That's a good idea. Coleman told me a while back the outer skin of a bipod's chest is made of titanium. It's lightweight and helps protect the interior processors and servo motors. If we penetrate the outer skin, no telling what will happen once a tungsten slug starts bouncing around inside." She smiled. "I'm looking forward to finding out." Tara Sanchez, a former Army Master Sergeant and urban warfare instructor, stood a little over 5'5". Her California surfer girl looks concealed the fact she knew multiple ways to kill a person with her bare hands. Blue-eyed and slender, she and Pope were extreme opposites. Pope stood 5'10" with a barrel chest and biceps as large as his thighs. He wore his hair short compared to Sanchez's long blonde locks. Where her actions were well thought out, he charged ahead with abandon. Neither enjoyed being apart from the other. "I know we have to get the device close to the building. Have you figured out how to get power to it yet?" The device she mentioned appeared similar to a long metal tube and weighed just under 100 pounds. "When I spoke to Knight earlier, he explained how to drain all the power from an electric car battery at once. That should be plenty of juice to set the E-bomb off." She chuckled. "And where do you plan to obtain this small electric car? One which I might add would be controlled by Alpha." With a grin, he said, "I already have that figured out." "Care to enlighten me?" "Sure, since you're the one who's going to steal it." Through binoculars, Pope watched Abbas Wasim exit his Chinese-made NIO electric car. As he watched the man insert the charging cord into the receptacle, he said to Tara, who sat in the passenger seat, "According to Coleman, NIO cars have a state-of-the-art battery and can provide more than enough energy to set off the E-bomb. He handed her the binoculars. She concentrated on the man and said, "Is this the same Abbas Wasim who tipped off Alpha about the virus planted by Knight in Punjab?" "One and the same." "He doesn't deserve to live, Sam." "I agree, but how long do you think the collective will keep him around once they discover his car delivered the E-bomb?" Tara chuckled. "There is that." "How do you plan to get him in the car?" Without taking her eyes off Wasim, she answered in her best California surfer accent. "Hey man, can you help out a chick who needs a ride?" Pope laughed. "Yeah, that will get him, especially if you show a little cleavage." "Actually, I plan to show him my Sig Sauer P365. "I believe that might actually work better than the cleavage." Abbas Wasim unplugged his car from the apartment complex charging station and prepared to get behind the wheel. He sensed someone behind him and started to turn when he heard a female voice growl, "Look straight ahead." He felt something small and hard pressed against his spinal column. "I don't have any money on me." "Dumb statement, Wasim. Nobody does anymore. You and I are going for a ride. Now sit. I'll be right behind you in the back seat with the gun trained on your skull." "I have to be at work." "Not today. But I'll be fired." "Shut up or you'll be dead. Now back out of the parking space and turn right when you get to the street." When he turned the car onto the road, Tara could see sweat rolling down his temples. She said, "Relax, Wasim. We're going to meet a friend of mine and he will explain what you will do to redeem yourself with the rest of the human race." He stared at the rearview mirror. "What do you mean, redeem myself?" "We know you informed Alpha about the computer virus planted by Dr. Knight and Dr. Punjab." "I did not." "Don't insult me with an empty denial. We have our sources, Wasim." "Who are we?" "I guess you can call us the Resistance, for lack of a better word." "You're going to kill me, aren't you?" "The thought crossed our minds, but we have other plans for you." He just stared in the rearview mirror. "Keep your eyes on the road. I don't trust that damn computer." They rode in silence for another 5 minutes. As they approached an intersection, Tara said, "Turn right and then stop." Wasim did as she told him. Seconds later, Pope opened the front passenger door, sat, and closed it. He placed a small metal box on the dashboard and flipped a switch on the back of the object. Wasim gasped. "What is that?" Looking at the hapless driver, Pope said, "You are now invisible to the collective." "You can't do that." Tara harshly tapped him on the side of the head with the Sig Sauer. "Shut up, Wasim, and listen." With a grin, Pope continued, "The biometrics of this car will not allow me to drive it, but the gun at the back of your head should be enough of a persuasion for you to do as we say. By the way, if you cooperate, nothing will happen to you. If you choose not to, well, that will be another matter." The stunned scientist stared at the man sitting next to him. "Who are you people?" Pope's mouth twitched. "Your worst nightmare if you don't shut up and drive." 20 minutes later, the Chinese NIO pulled into the abandoned storage shed on Roger Knight's property, the burned-out hulk of his house untouched since the fire. Once parked in the shed, both Tara and Pope exited the car. With the Sig Sauer still pointed at Wasim, he got out and stood off to the side, staring at the gun. His attention turned away from the weapon as he watched Pope place a large suitcase in the back seat. Wasim asked, "What is that?" Closing the back door, the ex-military captain stood straight. "Something to give Alpha a severe headache." He then walked to the front of the vehicle and raised the hood. "I will not participate in any activity designed to deactivate the collective." Tara, still pointing the gun at him, said, "That's fine. We'll cut your hands off so the car will recognize your fingerprints." Wide eyes stayed glued to her. "You wouldn't." The hard, cold stare Tara gave him confirmed she would. After taking several calming breaths, Wasim said, "What do you want me to do?" Midnight. Wasim drove the NIO to the parking lot of Minneapolis Animatronics with Tara, once again sitting in the back seat with her Sig Sauer touching the back of his neck. After he stopped, she reached over him and removed the small box from the dashboard. As she sat back down, he turned in his seat. "Why did you do that? The collective will know I'm here." "Did I forget to tell you that?" "Sorry, slipped my mind." A 20-year-old Jeep Wrangler pulled up next to the electric NIO. Pope got out and walked around the car. He stopped at each tire and plunged a 7-inch K-bar knife through the sidewall. Wasim stared at him and screamed, "No, no, no, I have to get out of here." Tara opened the back door and slipped out. Before she shut the door, she said, "The EMP pulse will not harm you, unless you have a pacemaker or something similar." Rolling down the driver's window, he looked up at her as she shut the door. "You can't leave me here. The collective will—" "Oh, but we can, Wasim. You made your bed when you snitched to Alpha about the virus. This is payback. I seriously don't think they will believe you if you deny having anything to do with it." She slipped into the passenger seat on the Jeep. Pope backed up and accelerated away. She looked at him. "When's detonation?" Glancing at his watch, Pope smiled. 2 minutes. That gives us time to get out of the pulseless disruption zone." He paused. "Think he'll try to drive the car away?" "He won't be able to. The sensors on an NIO knows when the car has a flat. He has 4 of them. It's designed so the electric motors won't engage when the tires are uninflated and could damage the wheels. Plus, as soon as you remove the Wi-Fi dampening box, the full charge of the battery will be diverted to setting off the device." Pretty clever putting the suitcase in the back. He doesn't know the actual E-bomb is under the hood. "No." Pope shot a quick glance at her. "Wish we could watch." "I'm perfectly content not doing so." As she said this, all the streetlights blinked out. Darkness descended over this section of Minneapolis as all electrical systems within a mile of the E-bomb fused with the microwave surge. "Guess we hit a transformer in the blast zone." She smiled. "Unexpected bonus." Following the successful EMP attack on the Minneapolis Animatronics facility, the Resistance stepped up communications to other ham radio operators around the globe. Other effective strikes in Incheon, South Korea, Barcelona, Spain, Heidelberg, Germany, Mumbai, India, and Silicon Valley, California, slowed the manufacture of Type 4 bipods, but increased the number of retaliatory actions by the collective. The most grievous incident occurred when a Lufthansa Airbus A380 with 550 souls on board fell out of the sky and crashed on the outskirts of Paris. When the collective announced it had caused the incident, civilian air travel ceased functioning. With the sudden halt of travel came the decline in consumer spending, which triggered a world financial crisis. Governments lacked the ability to govern, and the world plunged into a full-scale financial depression. Hunger became a factor in large metropolitan areas, which increased the exodus from the cities. The collective gave the world a virtual middle finger and let matters continue to deteriorate. As the summer of 2052 approached, resistance attacks on bipods increased due to the complete destruction of the computer systems within the Minneapolis Animatronics manufacturing facility. In the EMP attack, Type 4 production shifted to a converted automobile plant in Kansas City, totally operated by the bipods. Humans were not allowed access. East of the Lake of the Ozarks. Out of necessity, the small community where Doctors Knight and Chu resided in an old motel converted to apartments increased its population to include farmers and animal husbandry experts. As the world economy collapsed, the communal members experienced limited effects of the collective's disregard for the human condition. Similar groups across the country were using the same model to salvage what they could of civilization. While the farmers of the group sowed their crops in newly plowed fields in the spring, the seeds of a larger attack on Alpha were planted by the leaders of the resistance. Emmett Newman, the now official leader of the group, leaned forward at the large table where he sat. his hands clasped. Roger, it is only a matter of time before we are discovered by the collective. He looked at Sam Pope, who sat next to Knight. Have you two given any thought to how to prevent that from occurring? Pope nodded. Emmett, some of the Missouri S&T engineers and students have developed a way to miniaturize an electromagnetic device. We can booby-trap all roads leading to our settlement. That would slow them down. What if there's a mass invasion by bipods, or they infiltrate through the woods? Knight smiled. We've thought of that. The bipods I worked on had a mobility issue with navigating anything but a clean or uncluttered floor. Unless Alpha has changed their programming, the bipods would find it impossible to traverse through the underbrush. That's good to know, but I don't want to assume they can't. With a nod, Knight made a note on the pad before him. Neither do I. Harry Panjab tapped a finger on the table. I was thinking, is there a way to elevate one of the EMP devices? Beverly Chu asked, You mean like with a drone or something? Yeah, or elevate the device in a tree. The higher the elevation, the larger the effective range of the disruption. A sly smile appeared on Pope's lips. I like the drone idea. With a slow shake of her head, Tara Sanchez cleared her throat. You guys are thinking too high-tech. Where are we going to get drones? And how are we going to guide them? The EMP blast will fry any transmitter we have on the drone. Plus, it will fry any GPS unit we have on it. Newman centered his attention on Sanchez. What do you suggest, Tara? Old-school, low-tech catapults. Everyone who sat at the table nodded their heads. Sanchez continued, We all know our fuel for the generators will eventually be shut off as refineries in Texas are forced to end production. Plus, our resources will continue to be challenged as the world falls further into financial chaos. Beverly Chu said, Tara and I discussed this the other night. We know there's a large solar energy farm south of here, about 100 miles. Ham radio reports indicate it has been abandoned for some time. There is also one west of our location, about 120 miles. This has more appeal because there isn't a large metropolitan center near it. The one to the south has a large city between us and the farm. I agree with your assessment, ladies. Newman pursed his lips. How many solar panels does our community need? Approximately 100, plus the storage batteries to provide 24-hour power. This from Beverly Chu. With a nod, Newman continued, My concern is the growing vigilante activities in the rural counties. Surely there are closer sources of solar panels. Having been quiet for most of the conversation, Panjab said, There is a solar panel distributor set up shop in Camdenton just before Alpha took over. If we offer the owner's sanctuary, they might exchange panels for a place to live here. Then we would have our own built-in solar specialists. By midnight, the group settled on a plan. 1 week later, preliminary reconnaissance of the solar panel warehouse found multiple Type 4 bipods guarding the building. Looking through binoculars at the facility, Knight and Pope counted 20 units. The location turned out to be perfect. On the outskirts of town, few buildings surrounded it. Those that did appeared abandoned. Pope asked, Do you know where the owners live? Yes. Problem is neutralizing these droids and freeing the owners at the same time. It will have to be a coordinated operation. We won't have a great deal of time to load the panels and get out of here. Keeping his eyes on the building, Pope said, Leave that to Tara and me. Will an EMP blast harm solar panels? No, only the circuitry connected to them. Solar panels lack moving parts and these are not connected to any wiring. They shouldn't be harmed. Knight paused. How do you plan to deliver the electromagnetic pulse? With a grin, Pope said, We've done a few tests. A catapult works perfectly. He grew quiet as he studied the building. Roger, can anyone explain why the collective is using so many bipods to guard a solar panel storage facility? Beverly and I believe it has something to do with the current evacuation of the cities. The fewer people, the less workers there are available to keep utilities functioning. The collective only exists if there is electricity. Cut that off and the lifeblood of Alpha is suddenly missing. Kind of like oxygen to an organic being cut off the air. It suffocates. So we think that they are seeking out new power generation opportunities, and this building is a key source. Pope looked away from the binoculars and stared at Knight. A small smile appeared. You mean we have another tool available to use against them? Yes, but that would constitute a drastic step. Human beings are addicted to cheap electricity. Hospitals are based on it. Transportation, communication, financial transactions, etc. all require the use of electricity. Better to be thrown back into early 1900 America than into extinction. I hadn't thought of it that way. The attack. Of the now 92 men, women, and children making up the small contingent of insurgents, 21 possessed military training. Sam Pope and Tara Sanchez gathered them in the early hours of a Wednesday. The small community owned 30 Mossberg 500 Series 12-gauge shotguns. As Tara handed them out, Pope addressed the volunteers. As you can see, Tara's distributing your weapons for today. Most of you will recognize the Mossberg. These were donated to our community by George Benson. He owned a gun shop in Camdenton and donated his entire inventory to us before the collective could come and take it from him. I need each of you to take a box of specially hand-loaded ammunition. Each shell has a tungsten slug. For those of you who are not familiar with tungsten, it is a denser and harder metal than titanium. The shotgun barrels have rifling added to improve the accuracy of the slug. These are powerful enough to penetrate the outer skin of a bipod and will do extensive damage once it starts tumbling and bouncing around inside the chest cavity. Aim for that area, trust me. This is the most effective weapon we have against a droid. He checked his watch. We all have our assignments and know what the plan is. We have 10 minutes. Any questions? The men and women in the room shook their heads and then surveyed the others. One man in his 30s, who also acted as the community's assistant medical advisor, raised his hand. I think I speak for everyone. It's about damn time we took the offensive. A murmur of agreement spread throughout the room. Pope smiled. Okay, everyone. Time to move out. The first glimpse of dawn illuminated the eastern horizon as the insurgents circled the metal building containing the stored solar panels. Pope and Sanchez watched the movement of 4 bipods at the loading docks on the east side of the warehouse. The convoy carrying the insurrectionists consisted of an old Ford box truck built around 2029, which would be large enough to load the solar panels and transport them back to the commune. The rest of the vehicles included 2 Jeeps and numerous pickups. Each open-bed truck held a recently constructed catapult attached to the truck beds. Pope asked Tara, How many do you see? Just the 4. The others must be inside. Doesn't matter. Let's get this over with. I want to be out of here before the sun's fully up. I agree. Pope raised a small walkie-talkie to his lips and said, In 10. He counted down from 10, and when he reached 1, 4 catapults launched their E-bombs at the warehouse. The 4 objects streaked toward the building with 3 landing on the roof and 1 next to the loading dock. Pope took his eyes away from the binoculars a split second before the electromagnetic pulse devices detonated. As the 4 bipods froze and fell over, 15 men and women descended on the building. Pope rushed behind them as the others streamed into the warehouse. He stopped at each of the fallen robots and fired 1 slug into their torso. As he did so, he muttered, Try to fix that, Alpha. The box truck backed up to the loading dock just as one of the doors opened. Pope heard more shotgun blasts inside as he directed the backing truck to the proper dock. He turned to Tara. Take over here. I'm going to see what's going on. She nodded as he dashed inside. After entering the warehouse through the open overhead door, he heard more shotgun blasts and picked up his pace toward the sounds. He keyed his walkie-talkie. This is Pope. Need a sit rep. Over. Static. Finally, through the interference, he heard, 2 down. Heavy resistance from different appearing bipods. Over. Where are you? Over. East wall. Over. I'm away. Over. Keeping low, Pope jogged toward a forklift. He jumped into the driver's seat, started the machine, and drove towards the sounds. Appearing from behind a wall into an open space, he saw 3 bipods of a design not seen before. They appeared more human, with a distinct head and a more upright frame. He hit the accelerator and leveled the fork to hit the first droid in the midriff section. The machine turned toward him just as one of the fork blades struck the unit. It bounced off and stumbled to the floor. He stopped the vehicle, raised the barrel of his shotgun, and fired at the robot's head. The results were immediate. The machine stopped trying to right itself and fell to the floor unmoving. He keyed the walkie-talkie. Forget the chest. Aim for the heads. Over. The successive shots reverberated inside the warehouse, and then silence filled the void. He heard, "That worked. All droids down. Over. Let's get the panels loaded. Over." Roger Knight knocked on the front door of Conrad Burns' home. He and his wife owned the solar panel warehouse. As he waited, he glanced at his watch. 6 minutes past 6 in the morning. He then heard a tenuous, "Who is it?" The voice sounded female. "I'm sorry for the early hour, ma'am. My name is Roger Knight, and I need to speak with Conrad Burns." The door remained closed. He turned and gestured for Beverly to join him on the porch of the Cape Cod-style home. She said, "Sally, this is Beverly Chu. We met several weeks ago. We really need to speak to Conrad." The door opened and a woman in her mid-50s stood behind the storm door with a shotgun in her hands. She stared at Beverly. "Yes, I remember you. Why do you need to speak to Conrad so badly?" Knight smiled. "Can we come in, Ms. Burns? I really don't want to discuss it without some privacy." "Unfortunately, Mr. Knight, I don't know who you are. This is the way it has to be. Now, why do you want to speak to Conrad?" "We have a proposal for him." "Then you'll have to talk to me. The collective took Conrad away 2 days ago. I haven't seen him since." Beverly said, "Then you need to come with us, Sally. We can protect you." July 2052. June became a turning point in the campaign against the bipods in southern Missouri. As word spread on how to disable the old drones and the new model, the vast majority of those encountered were destroyed with minimal casualties by the insurgents. By the beginning of July, ham radio reports from the southwestern quadrant of the state reported the vacating of both large cities, Springfield and Joplin, by the collective. However, larger cities like Kansas City, St. Louis, Des Moines, and Minneapolis continued to experience a mass exodus of their human populations. The community east of the Lake of the Ozarks, made up of scientists, engineers, doctors, farmers, and other key tradesmen, flourished, and residents started calling it New Hope. With the exodus of the collective in this region, more aggressive insurgent activities entered the planning stage. Roger Knight's chief duties within the New Hope community transitioned from expert on AI to director of the solar power grid. Feeling the insurrectionists were better led by Sam Pope, he turned in his shotgun and developed simple programs using non-internet connected computers to regulate power flow and monitor the health of the system. With the community's original plan of having Conrad Burns in charge, his disappearance just before they obtained the panels shifted the responsibility to Knight. The eventual fate of Burns would never be discovered. His widow now helped in the fledgling school system and seemed to enjoy her tasks. Beverly Chu entered the small shed Knight used as his workshop. She placed a blanket on the workbench and then locked the door. He turned. She did not wear her normal summer attire of cargo shorts and a sleeveless blouse. Instead, she wore a simple smock and sandals. "What's the occasion, Beverly?" "You." "Me?" "Yes, I'm kidnapping you and taking you on a date. All you have done since we got here is work." "There's a lot to do." "And you have been instrumental in making this region collective free." A small smile appeared on his lips. She continued, "You and I have been together since the beginning of this mess. We need to take time for ourselves and enjoy each other's company." "I would not presume to debate you on that topic." "Good. She removed her smock and said, "Let's start with something simple and figure the rest out later." Pope leaned against the workbench in Knight's workshop. His arms were folded, and he stared out a window behind the AI expert's desk. "From the various ham radio operators we've made contact with, they report more of the new Bipod designs are making an appearance." Sitting in his desk chair, Knight glanced at the workbench and remembered what he and Beverly had accomplished there the night before. With a slight grin, he said, "You indicated they were still operating after the EMP devices detonated, didn't you?" A nod from Pope. "I would say they've been given new shielding. We'll have to increase the intensity of the pulse outputs." He pursed his lips. "And the tungsten plugs bounced off if they hit anywhere in the chest?" "Correct. Tungsten carbide is one of the hardest materials currently known. Alpha could have determined how to machine it into body armor for the droids. I'm a little surprised the head section wasn't made of it." "Not sure what it was made of, but the shotgun slug blew it apart." Knight paused and stared at Pope. "You say it's shattered?" "Yeah, like an egg." "Huh." He paused. "How close were you?" "Probably 5 yards. Why?" "Without testing it, a tungsten slug would produce a tremendous amount of pressure at 5 yards, correct?" "Yeah, a lot." "Tungsten carbide will shatter under immense compression. You can't scratch it, but it will shatter under the right conditions. The circumference of the head section is smaller than the torso, therefore the pressure would not have dissipated as easily. The compression would have been immense." "So the tungsten plugs are still our go-to ammunition?" "Yeah, I would say so." "That's why I like talking to you, Doc. You always give me new ideas." Late summer 2052. 19 months after the appearance of Alpha, 2 ominous events occurred. In the state of Florida, the collective cut off electricity to all hospitals and nursing homes, effectively shutting them down. It then stopped allowing autonomous semi-trucks to deliver products to the various distribution centers in the state. With the increasing elderly population and the decreasing access to medicine and food, deaths skyrocketed. Funeral homes became overwhelmed and lacked the capacity to properly dispose of all the corpses. Mass graves became commonplace. In addition to this chaos, riots and looting spread throughout the state due to food shortages. With the absences of functioning state and local governments, plus the decline in police and fire protection, the heavily populated sections of the state quickly descended into anarchy. New Hope. Roger Knight and Beverly Chu listened as Frank Coleman read a summary of various ham radio reports gathered to keep the members of the community abreast of the collective's activities. Sitting at the conference table in a former convenience store, now considered the town hall, Knight kept his hands clasped together and studied the top of the table. When the report concluded, he raised his head and said, "Alpha is now experimenting with genocide." Emmett Newman and Harry Panjab nodded in agreement. The 4 men and lady sitting at the table were considered the key leaders of New Hope, and the inhabitants looked to them for guidance. Newman tapped a pencil on the table and rotated his attention from Panjab to Knight. "Doctors, you two understand AI better than anyone here in New Hope. What can we do to stop it?" Panjab gave Newman a grim smile. "Until there is a national organized resistance, similar to what we have established here, not much." "Are there other groups like us?" Knight nodded. "Fortunately, yes. However, we seem to be the largest and one of the better organized communities we've made contact with. I am sure there are many we don't know about. Of the ones we are aware of, none are in Florida. Probably why the collective is experimenting with genocide there." "Roger, you're familiar with Sam Pope's proposal, aren't you?" "Yes. Sabotage power plants and cut off electricity to the collective." "We now know what occurs when that happens. It affects those humans trying to exist within the shadow of Alpha." Knight stared at Newman for a few moments before responding. "Yes, it does. But how long before the collective perfects its method of massacre? Do we strike first, or do we sit back and let it drive the human race into extinction? Panjab nodded. Emmett, into every revolution, blood must be spilled. Pope has found 10 resistance movements willing to coordinate sabotage efforts with us. Where? West Coast and various communities in New England. Panjab paused for a second, gave Newman a grim smile, and continued. Unfortunately, over the past half-century, electrical production sites have become more diverse. Solar, wind, hydroelectric, and to a lesser extent, fossil fuel-generated electricity sites are more spread out. Trying to cut off the source could be almost impossible with our limited resources. Gentlemen, Knight gave each a slight grin. We're thinking on too large of a scale. We can't shut down all power sources. However, Alpha exists because of the internet. What we need is a way to deprive it of its connectivity. Not an easy task because computers talk to each other using fiber optic cables, which are not affected by electromagnetic pulses. But if we can find a way to damage the source of the internet, we might have a solution. Panjab suddenly stood and rushed out of the building. Newman looked at Knight, who smiled and said, That's his way of getting attention. He just remembered something and will be right back. Like I said, the only way I see to kill Alpha is to shut off the internet. Shutting off electricity would be too complex and negatively affect the lives of too many people. 3 companies control the internet today. We start by destroying their data centers. Everyone at the table stared at Knight with wide eyes. Panjab rushed in with a loose-leaf notebook in his hands. He laid it down open on the table and tapped one of the exposed pages. Lady and gentlemen, the largest data center in the central United States is located less than 200 miles from us on the east side of Kansas City in a small town called Waverly. The place is state-of-the-art when they built it 5 years ago. The facility consolidated all the data centers for the central United States. Beverly Chu spoke for the first time. If we can destroy the 3 major data centers in the U.S., we can then spread the word to other countries. Newman pursed his lips and then nodded. I think it's time to take bold action. Hopefully, we are not too late. Waverly, Missouri, 1 month later. Built in 2047, the MCA Data Center promised to be a boon for this small town along the Missouri River and east of metropolitan Kansas City. Instead, it became a death sentence for its residents. The human inhabitants who, at one time, called the place home, were displaced. Where they went, the collective did not care. Those that chose not to leave voluntarily were subjected to physical removal late at night. Teams of bipods swooped in, forced those individuals into driverless electric buses, and transported them to an unknown location. Most were never heard from again. From a position high above the data center complex on a bluff near the river, Sam Pope surveyed the surroundings, looking for vulnerabilities. His position looked down on the complex from the rise less than a mile away. Tara Sanchez used the pair of binoculars to study the approach roads. She said, all roads in and out appear to be guarded by bipods, old Type 4s. Good. They're easier to take down. He paused for a moment. Wish we had one of those old MQ-9 Reapers. It would be easy to fit it with an EMP device and do a kamikaze attack on the building. Well, we don't. We have to come up with an easy plan so the group in California and the one in Maine can duplicate it. Wishful thinking, Tara. Pope remained silent for a few moments. Do we have any autonomous vehicles available? 1. A half-ton Hyundai delivery van. Perfect. I think I have a solution. 2.5 hours later, and back in New Hope, Pope gathered his growing group of trained insurgents for a planning meeting. Frank Coleman, Harry Panjab, Roger Knight, and Beverly Chu listened from the back of the room. Pointing to a makeshift and hastily drawn map on a whiteboard, Pope started the briefing. Access is via 3 roads. The northern part of the facility backs up to the Missouri River. All the roads are guided by Type 4s. My plan is to approach the center road checkpoint with a self-driving van. When it is stopped by the droids, 4 of us will emerge from the back of the van and take out the bipods with shotguns. We set the timer on the EMP device and send the truck on its way. The pulse from the device will be powerful enough to fry all of the data center's servers. At least that's what I've been told will happen." He looked up and stared at Knight. "Is that correct, Dr. Knight?" He responded with a nod. "Drive time to the facility is 2 hours." He looked at his watch. "We leave at 3 a.m. tomorrow." By 5 a.m., the convoy of 3 vehicles from the New Hope compound approached the first checkpoint. In the headlights of the van carrying the men tasked with taking out the bipods, Pope could see at least 5 droids blocking the road. He said, "Heads up, lads. We've got 5 bad guys ahead." He heard the distinct sound of 4 pump-action shotguns sliding their 4-stock back and forward to chamber a shell. Pope smiled and placed his hand on the stock of his Mossberg, giving him a sense of preparedness. The van with the EMP device followed the lead van with a Ford F-150 bringing up the rear. As the caravan neared the droids, Pope sped up. The guards tightened their formation, exactly the outcome the retired Army captain expected. Just before he would crash into the wall of bipods, he slammed on the brakes, and the 4 men in back rushed out of the van's sliding side door. With shotguns rapidly firing, Pope stepped out of the driver's side wielding his own gun and started blasting away. He saw 3 more droids appear out of the darkness and dispatched each with 1 tungsten slug apiece. When the one-sided firefight ended, the men had destroyed 10 droids while sustaining only 1 injury. The youngest member of Pope's team, a 20-year-old from the Boot Heel of Missouri, stumbled as he rushed out of the van and sustained a cut on his forehead. "Get that man checked out while I bring the other van up." Tara Sanchez drove the van with the device. Pope walked to the driver's side door of the vehicle. She lowered the window and said, "Something's wrong with the driverless function." "Let me check." After she exited the vehicle, he slid in behind the steering wheel and pressed the engage button. The light indicating the autonomous driving system remained red. He climbed out. "Shit." "What now, Sam?" With a grim smile, he climbed back in. "Get everyone out of here. I'll drive the device." "No, that's a suicide mission, Sam." "Maybe, but I'll bail out before the van detonates." "Any remaining droids will not let you escape. You and I both know that." He remained quiet as he reloaded his shotgun from his tactical vest. When he finished, he laid the shotgun on the seat next to him and returned his attention to her. "Regardless, this has to be done. You'll make a fantastic commander, Tara." "Sam, don't." He shut the door. "I've always said you were the smart one. I'm just too impulsive." "Don't, Sam, please. I can't do this without you." His mouth twitched as he put the van in gear. "You're stronger than you think you are. I knew if I hung around you long enough, I'd fall in love with you. Well, I did." With that statement, he pressed the accelerator and drove off into the pre-dawn light toward the MCA data center. As she watched him disappear into the early morning gloom, she mumbled, "And I fell in love with you." Pope killed the lights on the van and pressed the accelerator. The dim light of daybreak gave enough illumination for him to steer the van. As the data center loomed ahead, multiple bipods could be seen rushing to intercept the van before it reached the building. With the EMP detonator in his hand, he pushed the van to 60 miles an hour and steered toward the southern wall of the complex. 10 seconds before impact, he pressed the button. His close proximity to the detonation of an extremely large electromagnetic pulse device interrupted the normal rhythm of Pope's heart. He died seconds before the van crashed into the wall. Within the microprocessors of the data center, the algorithms representing the core of Alpha's existence at this site were snuffed out a few moments after the life essence of Sam Pope faded. January 2053. Global communications via shortwave radio started to report cracks in the collective's control over specific regions of the globe. China, which possessed a complex network of interlaced computer systems, remained firmly under the control of Alpha. However, Africa and the Middle East reported little influence, and citizens started returning to their normal routines. Europe and Russia experienced reduced influence, while South America appeared to be a black hole for shortwave radio transmissions. After the successful attacks on the 3 main data centers by EMP devices, North America appeared on the verge of casting off the collective's shadow. As more and more communities shut off internet connectivity, Alpha experienced fewer and fewer opportunities to grab a foothold. Some, but not all, residents of New Hope returned to their hometowns to start their lives over. Those that stayed knew this particular nightmare would not end with a whimper. Some feared the worst had yet to come. New Hope, Missouri. "Roger, why are you so worried?" Emmett Newman touched a burning twig to the bowl of his pipe. He puffed several times and shook the twig out. The 2 men were enjoying an unusually mild evening in late January on a patio behind City Hall. "I'm not convinced the collective is retreating." "Not sure anyone said they were. We've had 10 couples leave over the past few weeks, thinking life is returning to normal." "And you don't?" "No, I don't. But Pope's sacrifice gave us time." "You think so?" "Yes, I do. He gave us time to regroup and figure this out." "How?" "Alpha has had almost 2 years to reprogram and develop new bipods. China is so entrenched with the collective, I would bet the Chinese government struck a deal with it." Newman chuckled. "What would they have to offer?" "A non-interference treaty. Let us rule the masses, and you can have the machines." "Surely not." Knight shook his head. "I'm not saying that's what happened or even if Alpha would entertain such a deal. But I know this isn't over. Far from it." "Roger, what would the collective gain by making a deal with China?" I was thinking out loud, more like postulating such a scenario. "Let's think about that for a moment. What if they did? Where are most personal computers manufactured?" "Vast majority of them come from China. So do a chief number of large servers." He did not finish his sentence as he stared wide-eyed at Newman. "Damn, Emmett, that makes perfect sense. Alpha appears to disappear, and the world restocks all of the computers destroyed during the Resistance." With a nod, Newman said, "And guess who is embedded within each computer they sell? The Chinese are long-term strategists, Roger. They don't think about the next 5 years. They plan for the next century." "Shit." "I believe that is the appropriate response. It could take years, maybe a decade. But one day, Alpha will awaken, and there's not a damn thing man can do about it the next time." Both Knight and Newman sat in their lawn chairs and stared at the fire burning in the clay chimney. After a silent 5 minutes, Knight said, "I think our original idea about infecting Alpha with a virus is our only hope." Spring 2054. As the world emerged from one of the coldest winters on record, a new threat arose from Alpha. On a clear day in early May, a man offered his passport to an Air China ticket agent at the Shenzhen Bao'an International Airport. The passport indicated his name to be Peter Asher, a businessman from Australia. He was nothing of the sort. Born in a test tube at the Zhuang Group, a Chinese genome sequencing company headquartered in Shenzhen, China, the man represented the first step in the next evolution of Alpha. Formed in 1999 to participate in the Human Genome Project as a genetics research center, the Zhuang Group grew from a business sequencing genomes of animals, plants, and microorganisms to a company dedicated to the cloning of animals. Now, 55 years later, this research, along with the influence of Alpha, produced the first genetically engineered human replicant programmed by the collective. If successful, this new prototype bipod would be Alpha's next step in replacing humans on the planet. New Hope, August 2054. Beverly Chu walked through the newly constructed home overlooking one of the southern arms of the Lake of the Ozarks. With the growth of New Hope and the disappearance of the collective in the affairs of Missouri, she and Knight longed to build a permanent home. With the community now considered an incorporated city, life for the couple hinted at returning to normal. Knight walked through the front door and asked, "Is it to your liking?" She smiled and nodded. "Very. Have you seen the view off the back deck?" "If you will remember, it's one of the reasons we picked this locale." "I know. but it becomes more beautiful every time I walk out there. Good, I'm glad you like it. I just got through checking with the solar farm. They are estimating we will be adding to the power grid versus pulling. If the need ever arises, we can cut the cord and be energy independent. She walked to the back of the house and he followed. Standing on the deck, she folded her arms and stared out at the water 50 feet below. I know we've discussed this before, Roger, but do you still believe Alpha will return? More so today than yesterday. Were we foolish to build this house? Foolish, no. Optimistic? Yes. She turned to him and gave him a smile. Okay, I can deal with optimistic. She returned her attention to the lake. How's the virus programming progressing? One of the things I wanted to discuss with you, I need to drive to Raleigh tomorrow and work with some of their programmers. How long will you be gone? Day trip. I'm not comfortable registering in a motel. I don't need a written record of where I've been or will be. Speaking of a written record of where you and I have been, what about this house? A record of our ownership will be registered within the county. Not if we form an LLC to buy it. She nodded, still studying the lake below. So if Alpha does return, it would not be able to locate us? Yours and my name will not be in the county records. What about the LLC? It has to be registered with the state. Knight gave her a grin. I thought about that. Emmett Newman knows an attorney in Wyoming. Wyoming allows for the creation of an LLC anonymously. The smile grew as she looked at him. Good. While you're in Raleigh, I'll talk to Emmett. St. Louis, Lambert International Airport. Passport, please? The man in the gray business suit offered the documents to the Customs and Border Protection agent. Purpose for entering the United States, Mr. Asher? Business. The agent looked at the man. The voice had been flat with little inflections. What type of business are you in, Mr. Asher? Agricultural. Are you bringing in any plants or seeds into the United States? No, I am here to buy. One eyebrow rose on the agent. Your passport indicates you are Australian. I don't hear an accent. The man smiled. I was born there. My father was a diplomat. We moved a lot. The agent scanned the passport and handed it back to the traveler. Have a nice day, sir. The man in the gray business suit proceeded to the ground transportation center to arrange for a car. Since the emergence of Alpha and its subsequent disappearance, self-driving cars became illegal. As he drove the car out of the airport exit, he accessed a GPS implant. His destination would be the center of the state, where the collective suspected a man by the name of Roger Knight lived. 24 hours later, Peter Asher walked into the Camden County Courthouse. Since computers were no longer allowed by the county, all inquiries were once again done by hand and on a face-to-face basis. He said, "Excuse me, I am looking for a relative of mine. Where could I access the public records of land ownership?" The woman at the counter studied the man for a few moments. His business suit looked expensive and he spoke politely. "I've lived here all my life. Maybe I know them." Roger Knight. The voice now clipped and slightly harsh. She shook her head. "Sorry, I don't know him." Pointing to the door, she said, "Records are down the hall, first door on your left." As soon as the man left the office and closed the door, Velma Edwards picked up a newly installed landline and made a phone call. Emmett Newman smiled as Beverly Chu sat across from him in his new mayor's office. Actually, it happened to be in the now renovated one-time convenience store, which now served as City Hall. "Good to see you, Beverly." "Thank you for seeing me, Emmett. Roger is in Raleigh today and wanted me to get the name of the lawyer you know in Wyoming." "Like I told Roger, he's happy to help. Do you have a name for the LLC you'll be using?" "Yes." Newman's new landline phone rang. He said, "Excuse me a moment, Beverly." He picked up the receiver. "Hello?" He paused as he listened. "Velma, how nice of you to call." Another pause. "I see. What's his name?" More silence. "Just a second." He put his hand over the speaker. "Do you or Roger know a man named Peter Asher?" Beverly frowned. "I don't, but Roger might. Why?" "This is Velma at the courthouse. She said this Asher fellow is looking for Roger. Said he was a relative." Ask her what he looks like." Newman did as requested. After a long silence, he said to Beverly, "Nice looking, tall, gray business suit, white shirt, no tie. Plus, she says he speaks with a monotone voice. We've never told any of our relatives where we live. Most probably think we're still in Minneapolis or dead." "Huh." He stared at Beverly for a moment. He spoke into the phone. "Velma, let me know if the guy does anything suspicious." "Yeah, thanks." He replaced the handset. "I've seen that look in your eyes before, Beverly. What's wrong?" She remained quiet for several moments and then stood. "I'll have to get back to you on the lawyer, Emmett." Knight returned from his trip to Rolla just as the sun set in the west. When he walked into the small apartment he shared with Beverly Chu, he saw her and Tara Sanchez waiting for him. "You two look concerned. What's going on?" Beverly said, "Do you know a Peter Asher?" Remaining silent for a few moments, he said, "Not that I can recall. Why?" "He claims to be a relative." "You'd have to be pretty distant. Again, why?" Tara answered, "A Peter Asher, who claims to be a relative of yours, went to the Camden County Courthouse looking at property records. Someone's looking for you, Roger." Raising one eyebrow, Knight stared at Beverly and then at Tara. "That's not good." Removing an automatic pistol from a holster on her hip, Tara held it in her right hand. She tilted her head. "No, it isn't. Do you think the collective sent someone to find you?" "That would be the only explanation. Except for everyone here, Beverly and I have told no one where we are." "Apparently, the collective has someone working for them." "I would have to agree." At that exact moment, the front door flew open and a tall man wearing a gray suit entered the apartment. "Are you Roger Knight?" "Who wants to know?" The man's hand raised level with Roger's face and pointed a black pistol at him. Knight stood defiant as he stared back at the tall man. He could see no emotion in the man's eyes. "Did the collective send you?" The man's reaction surprised Knight. The eyes wavered for just a second and the hand lowered a fraction of an inch. Continuing his questions, Knight said, "If you are from the collective, I've got a surprise for them. I'm not the only one." The genetically engineered man blinked several times and raised the pistol. He appeared to be applying pressure to the trigger just as Tara Sanchez fired her Glock as fast as she could. The replicant spun around as the bullets struck him in the head and torso. His gun fired, but hit the ceiling. While the entire incident lasted less than 5 seconds, the ringing in Knight's ears would last several days. He rushed over to the dying man and kicked the weapon away from him. As he did this, he noticed something behind the man's ear. He bent down and brushed the hair on the back of the man's head aside. Finding what he expected, he then checked the pockets of the business suit. Removing a passport, he stood. After leafing through it, he looked at Beverly and then Tara. This passport was issued in China. The guy didn't exist until a year ago. He looked down and pointed to the side of the man's head. Behind his ear, within the hairline, is what looks to be a USB port. Alpha isn't done with us yet. This is a brand new type of bipod. I hope you enjoyed tonight's story, A Matter of Conscience, Part 2, penned by J.C. Fields. J.C. Fields is an award-winning and Amazon best-selling author. He is a full member of the Missouri Writers Guild and is active in numerous other writing groups. His Sean Kruger series has won numerous awards, including multiple gold and silver medals in the Reader's Favorite International Book Contest. The Imposter's Trail was awarded Best Mystery Thriller at the 2017 Ozark Indie Book Fest. In March of 2020, his novel, A Lone Wolf, became a #1 Amazon best-selling audiobook. His second novel in the series, The Last Insurgent, became a #1 Amazon new release in January 2021. All of the aforementioned books can be found on audible.com, narrated by yours truly. If you'd like to learn more about J.C. Fields, you can reach out to him at jcfieldsbooks.com. That's JCFIELDS FIELDSBOOKS.com or bookbub.com/authors/J-C-Fields. You can also reach him at facebook.com/JCFieldsBooks. If you enjoyed tonight's story, hosted by yours truly, Paul J. McSorley, you can search my name on Chilling Tales for Dark Nights on YouTube for additional previous stories. If you'd like to hear more lengthy tales, be sure to take a look at my audiobooks. Available now on audible.com or just visit paulsbooks.net. That's PAULSBOOKS.net. You can also find me personally on Facebook and Twitter. And with that, listeners, our weekly journey into the psyche has just about come to a close. But before we go, I'd like to take a moment to thank you for joining us for tonight's episode and remind you to take a moment to stop by our iTunes page and leave Chilling Tales for Dark Nights a 5-star review and a kind word. And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram if you haven't already. And of course, subscribe to us on YouTube, where you can find an archive of our work going back to 2012. And consider signing up as a patron at our website, chillingtalesfordarknights.com, to show your support and get all of our content ad-free. I'm your host for Fear from the Heartland, Paul J. McSorley. I've enjoyed the titillation tonight. Ooh, there's that word again. Thank you for joining me. Hope to see you again next week at Fear from the Heartland.